Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. Let's get into today's verse.
Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. That's James 3:16 from the Message version.
Wrapping up this week's Everyday Joy podcast, Jackie, so good to have you again in the studio.
Loving it, Joy. It's been a great week.
We've had so many different conversations. This verse is interesting. First of all, it's kind of dark. A lot of the verses we did previously were very uplifting, very challenging, very theological. And this one's like, yo, if you don't do this, you're going to end up at each other's throats. It's not mincing its words at all. It's going straight for the jugular.
Yep.
And I think my thought around this first impression is that it really strikes at the heart of pride, trying to look and appear like you're all put together, which is so much of what we base our lives on. And this verse kind of just cuts it down, makes it really nice and easy. And it says, hey, if that's how you're living your life, everything's going to fall apart. Just giving you a heads up.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, absolutely the same thing. And I mean, some other versions even go a little bit further. You know, wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there is disorder and everything that is evil. Like, you know, ouch. Like you said, it's a little bit dark, but it calls you to account. Like it absolutely says you might think you know all about this. You might think you've got all the wisdom, but let me show you what actual godly wisdom is. And it's not you being in control.
Yeah. In fact, that's the quickest way to be out of control, right? Really.
Absolutely.
What does this verse, Jack, tell you about who you think God is, his character, or what matters to him?
About his character, he is it and a bit. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are better than our thoughts. He knows the east from the west. All of that. He is the man. We are not. And he's quite happy being in that position because he knows who he is. And unfortunately, because I think sometimes we can say, well, I'm made in the image of Christ. Therefore, I know exactly what's going on and how to deal with it. And we don't. You know, there's something about being in the image of where we're constantly aspiring to be like him. We're constantly aspiring to see his wisdom, use his wisdom, espouse his wisdom. And it's not always the first thought that pops into our little heads.
Yeah, I love what you said about we're the image of Christ. We ain't Christ.
We are not it in a bit.
And as long as I think we are like a mirror, right? You can only reflect if you're right in front of the object, of the actual thing. So if we're moved away from God and we're not connecting and spending time with him, well, then we're no longer reflecting his image.
Yep.
So I think that's what I think of in terms of God's heart and what it tells me about what matters to him. I think it really matters to him that we don't make our life about projecting an image because it's not going to go well for anyone. Has this verse come alive in your life in any way, Jack?
Oh, absolutely. I can tell you about many different situations when I thought I knew what the best thing to do was. One of the most recent ones is actually a situation that's grown over a couple of years, but it's one of my kids had an ambition all through high school, knew what she wanted to do, knew, totally focused on that, picked subjects, so that she could focus on that. And then it went differently when she did her VCE, when she was deciding, what to do with offers and that kind of thing. And it went very differently and it looked completely different to what she'd spent years dreaming about. And of course, in that situation, as a parent, you're like, no, I know best. You've planned for this. You've done all these things. So what you should do is go off and do this. And like, to her credit, she was like, nah. Actually, she believed that, she had a different word from God, different, prompting from Holy Spirit to go and do something else.
Wow.
And I have to say at this point in time, she and God were right. Like, if I'd pushed her, if she'd gone and done this grand plan, she wouldn't be where she is today. She wouldn't have the relationship with God that she has today. And she wouldn't be the absolutely amazing person that she is.
Yeah, I had a very similar story as well. So for as long as I can remember, my mum and my dad were really supportive of me becoming a doctor. So all through school, I did the sciences and all of that. And I think a very similar story to your daughter. I found that by the time exams came around, I did my first year of sort of pre-med, and then they basically look at all your grades throughout that year, and it's like the top 1% will get an interview. I knew within 2 months of my uni year that I wasn't going. Like, my grades had already fallen. And it was really hard for me because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My whole life was building up to this moment. And all of a sudden, I'm kind of dealing with this fact that actually my brain doesn't work in the same way as all my peers. Which makes sense now because I'm a radio announcer, and all of a sudden, like, this works really well with the way my brain works. But back then I didn't know. And so I said to my mum and dad, like, I don't know what I want to do. I want to take a year off and do a year of ministry training. And my mum and my dad in the same way really struggled with that because it was the loss and the grief for them of kind of seeing their daughter make what they thought at the time a wrong decision or moving backwards. And it was really tough. And I'm so glad that you were able to navigate that and just kind of be a little hands off. For my parents, it was very different. It was a really tough situation for me. And we got through it. We're on the other side of it. But I completely agree. If I hadn't gone through that process, I wouldn't be sitting here in studio with you today. I would be probably harming a lot of poor patients in some hospital. And I think it's a blessing to the world that I did not become a doctor.
And it has to be like, as a parent, oh my gosh, I totally respect that that was your decision, but your poor parents, like.
It's not a good time for them.
No. And it's so hard, like, as a parent to actually say, I'm convinced I have 27 plus years of life experience on this, teenager. I know better. I know what this should look like.
Yeah.
And to be able to go, no, hang on, okay, do I want relationship or do I want to be right? And then making that choice. And I'll tell you what, my tongue was sore from biting. Keep your thoughts to yourself. Be encouraging. Fully support the decisions, because that's, unless she's doing something to, harm herself or harm others, obviously then, as a parent, you're going to step in and say, oi.
But when it comes to just the life decisions where there is no right or wrong, it's preference to support and encourage.
That's a tough gig. But it's like anything that you birth, whether it's a dream, whether it's a child, you have a vision for how that's going to look. And life may have partnered with you in that vision up to a point and then changed. And what do you do then? How do you accept it? How do you go about having relationship with your dream, your child, your vision?
And it seems like it's the idolizing of a dream or a goal or a vision. And all of a sudden that becomes the standard. That becomes the be all and the end all. And that's what this verse is warning us against. It's saying, whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. And I think when we idolize something, when we put something on a pedestal, we do that. We think that this thing is going to help us look better. We think that this thing is going to help us win the rat race or it's going to be good. It's going to make me feel good. Which is really interesting because it's a nuanced way of looking at this verse. It's not just saying, the way you see yourself or the way you want to express the way that you look. It's actually saying the things that we put value in as well. Those things can really pull you apart because the only thing we should be putting our value in is in God.
And a lot of the context around this verse as well is about wisdom. And it's about not believing in your own wisdom, but about, putting your trust in the wisdom of God and that what true godly wisdom is about. So, and I think, I'd encourage everybody to go read this verse, read it in different translations, different versions, and then actually come back to it and say, okay, what do I think about it now?
Well, that wraps up today's episode of the Everyday Joy podcast. You can get in touch via the email. It's just in the description below. I look forward to Monday's episode. Catch up with you then.